community stability, what do you immediately notice about these two ecosystems that's pretty different? Okay, start defining everything. Okay, yeah, so basically the Hawaiian rainforest is teeming with insane life. Everything is growing, growing, growing as fast as possible. There isn't an inch of that screen that isn't covered by a living thing. It's just a riot of growth. This is above the tree line in the Rockies. This could just as well be, the reason I thought of the grizzly man thing, this could just as well be Alaska. A lot of Alaska looks like this. A lot of that picture is not covered by living things. It's pretty desolate, lots of rocks, very thin soil. I mean, there are clumps of living things here. These are all clumps of plants, and there are lots of little tiny plants, but a lot of the ground cover is actually things like lichens and reindeer moss. It's very thin. So if you disturb an area here, in about 3 seconds it's going to start growing back. Because you do have deep soil, whether or not it's nutrient rich, you have deep soil, you've got abundant water and sunlight. So you've got everything that plant life needs to spring back really hard. And if the plant life's at the bottom of all the food chains, if the plant life springs back, then the animal life recovers pretty seamlessly. That's in the rainforest. That's in a really... a lot of the differences that you were noticing were really in species richness. Both species richness and species diversity would be higher in one of these places. Okay, so both species richness and species diversity are much higher in this picture. In this picture, these are pretty low species richness, low species diversity. Not a lot of species of living things. As I said, if you ran a bulldozer through here, honestly, in minutes, stuff would be starting to grow back because the conditions are so good. If you actually just stepped, you see these little hikers here in the distance? If you step off the path in an alpine environment like this and you knock a few plants loose, it may take them years to recover. I mean, literally. If you took a shovel and disturbed the soil on a 1 square foot space here, it literally might take years to grow back to where it was. So very little water, very little in the way of soils, low species richness, very few species, rough conditions basically, fewer connections. The community is less resistant to change. And the other way we can look at this is at looking at connections. So if we've got, all these different species, let's change that up. So if we have a community, and I'm showing like a fraction of the things that we might have in a biological community. If we have a community, the more connections that we have of things getting nutrients from multiple species, and if you remember, from food webs at some point, you might remember that they, the arrow, I just made that back, I made those all backwards. The arrow always goes to the thing that's getting the nutrients, so the thing that's doing the eating. So rabbits get nutrients from all these plant forms. Groundhogs get nutrients from all these plant forms. The more connections we have in an ecosystem, the better the chances that if you take out a few pieces, and everybody wants to eat the more connections we have, the tougher it is to break it apart. So basically, the more connections we've got in an ecosystem, the less likely we are that removing one piece of the ecosystem will sort of demolish it. The more complicated the web is, so the higher the species richness, the higher the diversity. If we remove one thing and everything that's connected to that one thing, if we've got a lot of living things, a lot of species in a community, the community recovers more quickly. Does that make sense? So having higher species richness, higher species diversity makes a community more resistant to change, basically.